everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. We talk all things NBA and NFL. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and hit that subscribe button down below because it really helps out our channel a lot. Also, let us know who is your pick to win the AFC South down in the comments below. Today we'll be doing another NFL divisional breakdown with the AFC South. How's it going, Roman?
I'm good, Drew. This division, we've been very excited for this one. Not really. I think it's going to be like the boringest division in NFL this year. And unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe for Chris, he's not here today to talk about it. But I'm excited to dive in to another episode with you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I guess maybe fortunately for Chris, he picked the right episode to miss out on. But he's got a big MLW game today, so this episode will obviously go out after that. But good luck to him. Hopefully, the Gators win. But yeah, we'll jump into it. There are some interesting teams. I mean, no, that's not super entertaining because when you have the Texans and the Jaguars in your division, two awful teams, it's not going to be great. But I think the two top teams in this division have some interesting storylines. But unfortunately, we will start with the worst team in this division last year, the Jacksonville Jaguars. As you can see, they only won one game. They finished at 1-15. They won week one, right? They beat the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was just like Gardner Minshew mania was in full force. I remember on this show, as a matter of fact, I think it was week 3 or week 4, we all picked them to win and beat the Dolphins on, I think, Thursday Night Football. And then the Jags got smashed by Miami. So that wasn't our
That
best. That wasn't great.
that game screwed me
Um,
in more ways than one. I'll just say that.
Oh yeah, I think you had Minshew as a fantasy. I think that was your fantasy pick of the week too. So it was just all around was not great for us and the Jaguars. But fortunately, I guess the one silver lining in finishing 1-15 is they were the worst team in the whole NFL last year and was able to get Trevor Lawrence. And they also were able to get Urban Meyer as their new head coach. I know both you and I are a little bit out on Urban Meyer, but I'm sure we'll get into that here in a second. But before we do, let me go over the additions and the subtractions. As I mentioned already, they got Trevor Lawrence at the 1-1 in the NFL draft. They also drafted, pretty surprisingly, if I do say so myself, because they already had a really good rookie running back last year in James Robinson, but they did draft Travis Etienne later in the round one. I think it was 23rd or 24th pick. But just a few days ago, it was announced that he will be out for this season. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I believe it was something in his foot. So he's unfortunately out for the season, which is really disappointing because he was so good in Clemson last year, and I was looking forward to seeing him play in the NFL, but hopefully we'll see him play really well in 2022. They also got Marvin Jones Jr. And Shaquille Griffin, Rayshon Jenkins, and Carlos Hyde teamed up with his college coach Urban Meyer and rejoined the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he was also in Jacksonville a couple years ago too, actually. So he's lots of reunions there for Carlos Hyde. In terms of key subtractions, they lost Joe Schobert, Keelan Cole, Dede Westbrook, and Al Woods. So obviously they weren't a great team last year. So the subtractions, they didn't lose a whole lot, but some notable names there for sure. But I'll let you get us started here, Roman. Are the Jaguars, do you think Trevor Lawrence is going to set the world on fire year one and lead the Jaguars to a playoff berth? Or do you think it might be more towards that 1-15 type of season like they had last year?
Well, when you're 1-15, it doesn't take much to have an improvement of a season. And obviously, just recently they officially announced for Trevor Lawrence to be their starter, even though we already kind of expect that to happen anyways. So they might try and trade Minshew. Who knows what kind of package or what kind of deal they'll get done for him. But I think this team will be entertaining just because, obviously when you have them an overall pick, all eyes are on them. I do like some of their additions, though. Marvin Jones, especially. I think he'll have a huge role this season. Kind of cutting into some of the work of, Chark, which we probably talk about a little bit too. Their defense, I think, is gonna not improve, but I think there's some pieces to look out for. And Josh Allen, C.J. Henderson, especially. Those guys are fun players to watch. ETN, I was excited to watch him play. Not for the Jaguars. I was hoping he'd go for a team that actually needed him, as opposed to Jacksonville, where I think James Robinson will have another fantastic season, in my opinion. So I think this team, well, I don't think they'll be good. I think actually, they're not my last place team in the division again, as we probably can assume. But I think this team will still be having a top 5, top 10 pick this year, but I think they'll have a lot of optimism for sure.
Yeah, you pretty much nailed everything that I was going to say. You originally shocked me when you said they weren't the last place team in your division, but then I forgot the jersey I'm wearing. This team is also in this division. So they'd probably be a last place team, though, in pretty much every other division, I think it's safe to say. maybe outside the NFC North, but I know that's a touchy subject for you, as a Lions fan, so we won't get into that. Um, but yeah, I mean, the defense, it's going to be better than it was last year, but still not great, I don't think. And same thing with the offense. I think it's going to be a little bit better. I know maybe because we're Lions fans, I feel like I've seen a lot of Marvin Jones hype and everyone's excited about him. I just don't really get it. I know Chris doesn't get it as well. I wish he was on here. I know he has some hot Marvin Jones takes, but I mean, he was good last year, but he was, I mean, I remember the beginning of the year, everyone was like, oh, he's washed. He's done. He's done. And then the second half of the year, he played really well. And I just don't, that's my concern, I guess, with Marvin Jones is it's like, is he going to be that guy he was the second half of the year, or is he going to be more like the guy he was to start the season? So
I think
somewhat
he'll
concerning
be
there.
I think he'll be all reliable for Trevor Lawrence. I think he's been like kind of one of his main targets in the preseason, so that's I guess encouraging to see. Although they obviously haven't been playing all their starters. Chark himself has been dealing with a minor injury himself, so hopefully it doesn't cut into the season too much. But I think overall, in terms of weapons, I think Trevor Lawrence is set all around. Obviously, Chark, Chenault coming into year two could break out, and then Chark or then Marvin. Obviously, they don't have much at the tight end position. Unfortunately, they cut Tim Tebow, who was my fantasy pick today. No, I'm just kidding. But they have no one really notable at the tight end position. Offensive line is still having their growing pains. Hopefully, he doesn't have a Joe Burrow where he just doesn't get
Yeah.
protected at all. That's probably just the main concern for this team. Just protecting him because obviously they're not going to contend for anything this year. A win for them would just be making it out with Lawrence still healthy. So I think there are some encouraging pieces as I mentioned. I think he'll have some good weapons on in the wide receiver room, but um, overall, I think there are some good pieces to talk about.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad you touched about the offensive line too, because Trevor's taken some hits so far in the preseason. I don't know if you watched any of their games, but he's taken some big hits, and it's just the preseason. So I'm glad you mentioned Joe Burrow because I hope Lawrence doesn't go down with an injury like Burrow did because so far in the preseason, at least, Burrow hasn't looked, or at least in training camp, by all accounts. I think he's playing his first preseason game. I think this week. By all accounts, Burrow hasn't looked like the same guy. So that's a little worrisome if you're a Jaguars fan because the Jags' offensive line is not good, really at all. And the receiver room, yeah, it's not awful. I know a lot of people are out on DJ Chark, but I don't think he's that bad. And you mentioned too James Robinson. I think he's going to have a really good season. There's a lot of talk, I know from us, that maybe he'd get traded because they signed ETN, but now he gets or drafted to ETN. Now he gets to be the RB1 again, most likely. There has been some hype about Carlos Hyde potentially being the 1A or 1B to Robinson's 1A, which I don't love that news. But Robinson has a great opportunity now to really show that last year wasn't just a fluke. Especially behind a brutal offensive line. And hopefully, I don't think he's the long-term answer there. I think there's a reason they drafted ETN first or in the first round. He's their future guy. But if Robinson's able to have a really nice season, he's potentially could get traded in the offseason to an even better situation. So I think that's really hopeful for him. And then the receiver room, like I said, I know I kind of briefly started to mention it a second ago, and then I kind of went on a tangent there. But I feel like they're a bunch of twos and threes. If they had like a one like bona fide guy, then this would be a really nice receiver room. But it's solid, right? I think Laviska, Chark, Jones, they're solid like secondary options to like a big name piece. Maybe DeAndre Hopkins. I have his jersey on right now. Some flag like that. So maybe that's something that they look at in the offseason, either through the draft, or through free agency. I don't know who would want to come to Jacksonville, but maybe that as well. So, but yeah, it's unfortunately for Jacksonville fans, at least for one more season, it's going to be much more just looking to the future and looking to the next season. You're hoping that Trevor Lawrence is going to look good and look as good as the generational prospect that he's been hyped up as since he was like a junior in high school. I'm definitely excited to watch him play because he's at least for as long as I can remember, he's the most hyped prospect. I mean, I've been hearing about this guy for years now. It's going to be really fun to finally see him play NFL football. But did you have anything else you wanted to add about Jackson before we get into our record predictions?
Yeah, I did. I just want to touch on Urban Meyer quite a little bit because
Oh
I know
yeah,
that you brought him up at the beginning. I'm still very much not a fan of the hire. I think you might be on that same boat as me. Chris was actually the highest on us. If you watch our ranking the coaching hires episode from way back when, Chris was actually had him first on his list. I had him second, just because of the name brand value, I think, and then you had him at four, behind Arthur Smith, Salah, and Dan Campbell. So I think I do. I still agree with my takes from back then. I think he is a name value, and I think he will buy sell tickets. That's also why he signed Tebow and sold a lot of jerseys, even though they'll be useless now. But I don't think he'll live out his entire contract. I think he'll probably get fired or retire um, before his full contract is over. And this is just a side note. Like looking at the episode of coaching hires, none of them have really stood out from the pack. I think all of them are still like not great or are working through it. Urban Meyer being a part of that list and still kind of hanging out in that tier, kind of disappointing because I think many people might have expected more from him. But I, for one, don't think this will be very well for him.
Yeah, I agree, and I stand by everything I said in that episode as well. If you haven't checked out that episode, I think we did it back in what, February. So go back on the channel and view it if you want to hear more of our thoughts on all the coaching hires. But yeah, I stand by everything I said in that episode. Urban Meyer is a known guy when the going gets tough and he's not winning games and things aren't going his way. He has some head issue or whatever, and then he retires. That's what happens with him. By all accounts, he does not handle adversity well at all. And I know everyone likes to talk about how the Lions are the worst franchise in the NFL, and there's a lot of proof to back that up. But Jaguars aren't far behind, right? They're not a great franchise either. So he's in a really tough situation, and it's going to be really interesting to see if he's able to handle it better and shut up a lot of the doubters because he's
Yeah,
saying all
well,
the right things, but I don't
yeah.
know.
This team is not a winner. This will be the first team he had that is not a winner
Yeah.
at all. So, like you mentioned, there will be adversity, and we'll see how he handles.
Yeah, and there's also reports too that just came out yesterday as well, saying how players are not a fan of Urban Meyer's college ways, I believe is what they said. So,
Shocking.
and this is something that we've heard a lot from several different college coaches. Even Pete Carroll, back when he was with the Patriots years ago, back in the '90s, there were some reports that Pete Carroll's college ways they didn't love it. And you go over to the NBA. John Beeline was a great coach for Michigan. He got a head coaching job with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and players didn't like it. There's a lot of guys who try to go to the professional leagues after having success in college and just doesn't work. So it could be the same for Urban. You never. Nick Saban too is another guy when he was with the Dolphins back before he went to Alabama. Another guy. So yeah, it's gonna be definitely interesting to see. But I think we maybe did this on the episode too. We put like at a line for how many years he'll be here. I think I'm gonna say probably like 2-3 years tops, in my opinion. I don't think unless Trevor is just like he just sets the world on fire right away and they win. Like I think if they win 6 or 7 games this year, then he's gonna maybe live out that contract. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see. But I think more so the hire was to get people amped up about Jacksonville, to get people talking about Jacksonville, because I definitely know I'm more excited about them this year than I was last year. And that's not saying much, but still, there's going to be more butts in the seats, at least for the first few weeks of the season, because they have Lawrence as their quarterback and Urban as their head coach. But I think we spent way too much time on Jacksonville for one episode, but they do have some interesting storylines. So I'm going to jump in now to our predictions for their record. I have them at 4-13, so not a great season, but slight improvement from last year. They do have a relatively tough schedule. This whole division does for the most part. So I have them at 4-13, and then Chris is a little bit higher on them, literally by one game. He's got them going 5-12. So we're basically in the same boat there. Roman, what's your record for the Jags?
Yeah, I have him at 4-13, just like you. So nothing much to add there.
Okay, so I think I can't speak for Chris, but I think we're all pretty much in the same boat then. We think they're going to be exciting, entertaining, but still a little bit better than last year, but still not a good football team by any means. So now we'll hop in now to probably the second best team in this division. Spoiler alert to my record predictions, but yet the Indianapolis Colts. They were 11-5 last year. I think Chris and I were very high on them. I know you were lower on them, but I think they had a slightly disappointing season, I would say, based on how Chris and I projected them. I think Chris might have had them going to the Super Bowl. I might be mistaken there, but he had them going far. I had them going very far as well. And they made the playoffs. They won 11-5, very successful season, but they did lose in the wild card round. They put up a heck of a fight against the Bills, but came up just short on that final Hail Mary. And then obviously we don't have him here, but in terms of key subtractions, Philip Rivers retired after the end of the season, even though I thought he was relatively solid for them last year. And in Philip Rivers' place, they added Carson Wentz in a trade very early in the offseason with the Philadelphia Eagles. Wentz was injured early on in training camp. I believe he had surgery, and the hope is he's going to be back relatively soon. So that's positive news because that injury did look scary when it first happened. I'm sure we're going to get into talking about him in a second, but I am excited to see. Hopefully, Wentz stays healthy because I'm excited to see what he does with a new offense with Frank Reich once again. In terms of also additions, they added Kwity Paye in the first round of the draft. Eric Fisher from the Chiefs, Antoine Woods, and Malik Jefferson. Key subtractions, along with Phillip Rivers, they lost Justin Houston and Malik Hooker. So some decent notable guys they lost, but they also brought in a lot as well. So since you start us off with the Jags, I can start us off with the Colts. I'm not as high on this team as I was last year, but I still think they're very solid. If Eric Fisher is able to stay healthy, I do like their offensive line. I'm a little worried about their receiving room. They don't have a ton of options there, but if Michael Pittman is able to really pop off and really show a lot of the promise that we were hyping him up to have last year in his second year in the NFL, I really like this receiving room a lot more. They also still have, I believe, Eric Pascal, Paris Campbell, and T.Y. Hilton, who is obviously a bigger name, but he's very old. So I don't know about that. But yeah, the tight ends too. They got Jack Doyle, who's I think he's a solid option there at tight end, and Mo Alley Cox as well. And they have a beast in the running. They have a really nice running back room. They got Jonathan Taylor as the number one. Naeem Hines is the number two. I think he'd be a number one in other places. I think he's a really good running back. And they got Marlon Mack coming back from injury too, who's a solid guy, solid depth piece for sure, in my opinion. So it's really, I think offensively, it's really going to come down to Carson Wentz. If he stays healthy, which he's already hurt, which isn't great. But if he stays healthy, I mean, we saw when he was with Frank Reich last time, and I think Chris and I kind of talked about this when we broke down the trade a few months ago in our update video. When he was with Frank Reich, he was an MVP. He led the Eagles to the Super Bowl. I know he got hurt there at the end of the year, but he was the guy. I mean, he was the MVP. And then once Frank Reich left, it slowly kind of went downhill for Wentz. And obviously, we saw last year where he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the entire NFL. So if he's able to stay healthy, I know there's some character problems behind the scenes with Wentz that people don't like him, and he's kind of full of himself and yada yada yada. But if he's able to kind of handle those issues, become a better person, and stay healthy, I think he could have a really, really successful season here with the Colts. And I think if that's the case, I think there's no reason why this team can't win the division and compete for a Super Bowl again. I really believe that. Do I completely think that Wentz is going to pop off this year? Not entirely, but I still think that the upside is definitely there. And then in terms of the defense, it's still a solid unit as well. And I think it's going to, they lost some guys, but they also added some guys. Kwity Paye was a beast for Michigan. I'm really excited to see what he can do with the Colts. So yeah, I think overall this is a solid team. And it's really just going to come down on this. I feel like we're kind of having the same conversation that we had last year, but it was with Phillip Rivers. If the team's there, if Phillip Rivers is ever able to perform, they're going to be a playoff team, compete for Super Bowls. And Rivers didn't completely deliver on that, but did a pretty good job. I think it's the same thing for Wentz. I think it's even greater for Wentz if he's able to be the MVP. We saw it before. The Eagles won the Super Bowl, so the Colts could definitely win a Super Bowl and maybe shock the world. But I've talked a lot about the Colts. I like them a lot. What are your thoughts on them?
No, I definitely agree. I like this team a lot. I think Wentz is obviously an upgrade over Phillip Rivers, like you mentioned. Though I do think Rivers had a decent season last year, but Colts fans better expect or want him to be like a superstar because that's what they're hoping he would be now with Frank Reich. And now that they have high expectations, they were in the playoffs last year. They want to win the division. I think they can. However, I think while the defense is going to be their main improvement, main attraction of that team. I think the offensive injuries could be the downfall entirely. Obviously, Wentz avoided a major injury. He was supposed to be out injured maybe until halfway through the season, but now he looks like he'll be back week one. In terms of the offensive line, actually, Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly, both mainstays on that line, are actually nursing injuries. And their status for week one is still questionable. We don't even know if they'll be back week one. So if they miss any significant time, Nelson especially, that could be pretty damaging, as well as Fisher, who was out for the Super Bowl. So hopefully he's 100% for sure. But the offensive line looks good on paper. However, if they're injured and not fully functioning, that could be a big problem. Like you mentioned, I think Pittman's the only notable receiver on that team, so that could be not great in terms of receiving weapons. But you'd expect Jonathan Taylor to make a huge leap this year. I do like Hines as well. And then Mack obviously coming off an Achilles, so hopefully he can contribute in some way. But yeah, the defense will have to carry this team, in my opinion. They're my second place team in the division. but I think they have the improvement or the upside to maybe take on Tennessee for the division title. But it all depends on Wentz and his status. If he's back to his old self, or if he's still carrying some of that drama and that ego from last year to Indy. But I think this team will be very notable. I think Wentz has a lot of pressure on him. I'm interested in seeing how he performs under that, and if he can, improve the team as a whole and get them to the playoffs and maybe a playoff win too.
And I mean, there's been a lot of there's a lot of top picks that got traded this past offseason. Wentz, Sam Darnold, Jared Goff. And Wentz has obviously been hurt, but I know with Goff and Darnold, there has been some reports from camp where the humbling and the chip on their shoulder has grown because the team that drafted them gave up on them. And these are both Darnold and Goff and also Wentz are guys that never really faced any adversity. So that it was actually kind of good for them. And I know Goff hasn't looked great in camp, but Darnold, by all accounts, is really kind of taking that by the horn. So really, it's up to Wentz. I mean, he could kind of take that adversity and do well, or he could be like kind of like you said, where if he's still has that huge ego and still thinks he's awesome, I mean, that's going to be some issues and the team's not going to succeed. But yeah, I think the defense is going to be solid. I don't think there's too many question marks on that side of the ball. The offense, though, as you and I both already kind of mentioned, the offensive line, the receiving group, and even the running back room to an extent. If the offensive line is dismantled, I mean, you need a good offensive line to have a solid running game. So no matter how talented Taylor and Hines are, if that offensive line is injured and not good, they're not going to run the ball as well as they maybe potentially could. And then same thing with Wentz. We saw last year with a brutal, beaten up offensive line in Philadelphia. Wentz would run 45 yards the opposite direction and then throw an interception or get sacked, and it was just a mess. So he doesn't handle pressure greatly. So it's really the offensive line is going to be key, and the same thing with the receivers, as we already said. It's not a great receiving room on paper, at least, but it has potential to be good. So, but yeah, I think the question marks that we've gone over, I feel like in depth already, are the reason why I don't have them as my first place team. I still have them having a really good record though. I have them going 11-5. I still think they're going to have a successful season. That is contingent on Wentz being healthy. If he's not healthy, I mean, they're going to have Jake Luton, I think that he's their backup, right? Or no? Is it Jake Luton?
No, Jacob Eason.
Jacob Eason. I knew there was a Jake. I was like, I got him messed up. But yeah, Jacob Eason is the backup. If he's the backup, if he plays, I have them probably being more like a 6-7 win team, to be honest, because you need a good quarterback to succeed. But I think if Wentz stays healthy, I got them going 11-5, exactly how they did last year. They're going to be a wild card team. I'll mention Chris's record briefly as well. He's got them 10-7, so slightly below me, but we're kind of in the same ballpark, similar to how we were with the Jags. But where do you have the Colts going here?
I will mention though that for your record, you didn't take into account the extra game as opposed to 11-5, maybe
That is
12 and
true.
5 or
That
11
is
and
true.
6. But
I wrote down 11-6. I don't know why I said 11-5. So yes, 11-6. That's what I meant to say.
yeah, for me though, I kind of assumed, for my predictions that they'd be a wild card team. But as I was going through their schedule, I just it didn't turn out that way, and I'm surprised with the record I came up with. According to what I did, I have them at 9-8, which might be surprising or maybe lower than some people might think. But I think their schedule isn't very favorable in my opinion. But I do think obviously if Wentz is good enough, they could absolutely blow that record out of the water. But yeah, I'm surprised I have them 9-8 myself, but I guess I gotta live with it now.
Yeah, I know. I do know. Looking at their schedule, like their first half of their schedule is brutal. Like it's tough. I think they play the Bills. They might even play the Chiefs. If I don't remember off the top of my head, but they play some really solid teams there to start the year. And then the second half of the season, it gets a little bit easier. They play the Jags. They play the Texans a lot. They play some of the easier teams, at least on paper, in the league. I think they play the Patriots, which I like the Patriots, but I don't know. I think the Colts on paper, as long as Wentz is healthy, are probably better than the Pats. So it gets a little bit easier there down the stretch, and that's kind of why I have them winning 11. I think they're going to get off to maybe a slower start, but then they're going to kind of gain speed. But 9-8 isn't terribly lower than where Chris or I had them. I mean, I have them 11. Chris has them at 10. You have them at 9. We're all kind of in that same ballpark for the most part. But it's definitely going to be a fun team to watch, though. I think there's a wide range of outcomes for this team. They could be a Super Bowl contender, or they could miss the playoffs. And it's really going to come down to that guy, number 2. He looks weird with the number 2, in my opinion, Carson Wentz. But do you have anything else you want to add for the Colts before we hop into the Titans? All right, let's go into the Titans then. So Tennessee Titans, they also finished 11-5 last year, but they did win the division. But they also lost in the wild card round. In that very entertaining game against the Baltimore Ravens. And this was one of the more active teams in the offseason. So in terms of key additions, they added Bud Dupree. They had probably one of the biggest trades, at least, of the offseason, Julio Jones, who's also pictured right there. He does look kind of weird in the number 2 as well. Maybe I just have a thing with the number 2. Then they also got Caleb Farley in the draft, Janoris Jenkins, Josh Reynolds, and Bradley McDougald. Key subtractions, they lost Javion Clowney, in my opinion, one of the most overrated players in the NFL. Corey Davis, in my opinion, one of the most underrated players in the NFL. Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson, and Adam Humphries. So a lot of moving parts here with the Titans. I'll let you start us off here with it since I started us off with the Colts. So what are your thoughts on the somewhat same Titans, but also a little bit different Titans?
Yeah, they've been very active. Obviously, they've lost a lot of players, but they have also gotten upgrades at those same positions. I think obviously when you trade out Corey Davis for Julio Jones, that's definitely an upgrade. Chris will tell you that's an absolute upgrade because he hates him a lot. But I like their other additions as well. Caleb Farley, who was injured on draft day, so hopefully he's good now. Janoris Jenkins, I don't think that's a bum signing either. I think he can contribute now that they lost 2 corners and they filled them with both guys, with Farley and Jenkins. Josh Reynolds, I like the signing. I think he'll even contribute. I thought he was going to contribute even before they trade for Julio. So I think I think the wide receiver room is kind of set with Jones, AJ Brown, and Reynolds. I think that's a good trio. Running backs, obviously, you can't nothing much to say about Derrick Henry. I think he'll actually have a same season. I don't think he'll regress that much. Whereas many people think he'll regress a lot. I think he'll be able to contribute quite a bit. Obviously, Arthur Smith isn't there anymore, so they might not run it as much. They might put the game more in Tannehill's hands, who he's proven to actually been able to do that. I think whereas last year, I think it was more of a concern whether he could actually replicate what he did, but either year before. I think he's one of a consistent, confident quarterback, so you can say that he'll have a good season. So I was sort of down on him last year, but now I'm fully confident in him this year. And when Bud Dupree, obviously, that's a good signing as well, filling up another linebacking spot, and obviously losing Clowney, who you think he's overrated. I think he was just rated, so I think he was a decent loss as well. But overall, I think they made a lot of big signings. They lost a lot of key players. I don't think that will result in much of a change in their status in the division. Obviously, I still have them winning the division, but in terms of record, I have them. I don't want to get too ahead of it, but I already have them at an even 11-6. So pretty level, I think, compared to before. But I think they have enough to replicate and go back to back.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on everything. I agree with everything you said. I'm glad you mentioned Josh Reynolds too, because I think he was a little underrated last year for the Rams. I thought he was a solid receiver, and I think he can slide right into that Adam Humphries, Corey Davis role, and then Julio. And you obviously got Julio Jones just chilling there too. So much improved receiver core. We haven't even. I don't know. Forgive me. You probably mentioned him, but AJ Brown too. Obviously they got him. Awesome receiver. And I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be a really good team. Ryan Tannehill, I think, is still underrated at quarterback somehow. I mean, he's been a top 10 quarterback now for over a season and a half, basically 2 full seasons. He's been really good. MVP candidate. I think he'll be right there, back there again. Same with Derrick Henry's a beast. Their offensive line is solid. It's really gonna. I have them winning the division. I have them, obviously making the playoffs. The thing that's going to separate them from just being a playoff team like they were last year and a true Super Bowl contender, which I think they have the potential to be, is their defense. Their defense was so bad last year. And Jadeveon Clowney, even though I do think he's overrated because it's like, oh, Jadeveon Clowney got traded. It's like, all right, he's a good player, but he's not. I don't think he's as good as people say he is. He had that one monster hit in the South Carolina Michigan Outback Bowl 8 years ago, and everyone he's ridden that high to the first overall pick and all that stuff since then. He's a solid player, but I think he's a bit overrated. But he's still going to be missed, I think. Malcolm Butler too. He's similarly, I feel like he's kind of riding that high of the Super Bowl Patriots interception, and he's solid, but I don't think he's elite as people like to think he is. But I think they addressed that stuff though too in the draft. Caleb Farley, as well as signing Bud Dupree, getting Janoris Jenkins. I think those are good signings. But I'm a little questioning whether they did enough on the defensive side of the ball to improve. Because like I said, they did lose some pieces, and they added some guys too, but was that enough to make it not the absolute brutal unit it was last year? Because the offense, and I know you have something to say. I know you have something to say. What do you want to say?
I was just gonna say, well, you mentioned the defense. I think it's the pass rush specifically that might be the key factor for me in terms of defense
Yeah,
because losing Clowney, like he was probably their only source of production last year, and now you get rid of him. I mean, Dupree is a good signing; he'll contribute a lot. But then what else do you have? Like Jeffrey
yeah,
Simmons, Evans. I mean, who else? Like they don't have a pass rush, so I think that might be the only reason that they might not do good this year or not win any playoff games.
yeah, and that's why, I mean, I'll say what my record is for them right now, since you said yours. I have them going 12-5. So I have them winning the division, but they're only one game better than the Colts. And I think so if some of the things we talked about with the Colts, we have a good defense. If those things bounce right, I think very easily the Colts could win this division because the Titans defense is just not great. It's not great. And also offensively, as I was about to say, they lost Arthur Smith. I mean, I'm really interested to see. I mean, he was a really good offensive coordinator. I'm interested to see how that kind of impacts them. Because yeah, on paper the talent is there. The offense can be a top 5, top 3 unit like it was last year. However, I mean, will they still run the ball? Is Derrick Henry going to fall off because you keep just running him into the ground year after year? Eventually, as history has shown, these running backs, they really, when they fall off a cliff, they really fall off a cliff. Let's look at Todd Gurley, who's still not signed. Is that going to happen with Derrick Henry this year? It might not. I said the same thing last season about the Titans, and they proved me wrong, and they were really good. And now they also have Julio, but Julio also has injury issues. There's a lot, and AJ Brown has injury issues. There's a lot of question marks with this team. I think it's in terms of our division winners. This is probably the one division winner that at least I have that I'm the most concerned about. Maybe the NFC East with I think I had Washington football team as my division winner there. That's probably the one other division winner that I'm very hesitant about. But the Titans, I'm pretty hesitant about them too. I think they're going to be a good team still. I got them winning 12 games, but there's a lot of things that could go wrong for this team, I think.
And this just might be an overreaction, but the Titans also actually have a COVID outbreak right now that, Vrabel is sidelined, Tannehill is sidelined, and if that goes into the season, that could cause some major problems. But hopefully they get those two back before the season. Obviously, Vrabel isn't playing or anything, but Vrabel is a good coach. I think he was a great signing by Tennessee.
Yeah, he's a good coach, but I gotta tell you what, man, he's got to get this stuff under control because they're the team that had the
Yep,
massive outbreak last year too. It's like
that is true.
31 teams are able to get this thing for the most part under control, and Tennessee's always having these outbreaks. I mean, I get it's dangerous, and it's you got to do what you got to do, and it's but the fact that 31 teams are able to control it relatively, and Tennessee keeps having these outbreaks, and I know, forgive me if I'm wrong, but last year I think wasn't it because people weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, and they
Yeah,
weren't,
yeah.
yeah. So hopefully that's not the case this year. Hopefully everyone stays healthy and gets healthy, normal. But like, come on, guys, you gotta do a little bit better in that regard, making sure you're staying healthy and keeping safe. But yeah, that's another kind of wrench to throw in them. So the more we're talking about this, and maybe the Colts are my division winner, but I'm just kidding. I'm just looking at the Titans as my division winner at 12-6, but or 12-5, or yeah, 12-5, excuse me. All these all these numbers, man. This schedule, it's crazy. But yeah, I still have them going 12-5, and still having them win the division and make the playoffs. But there's some question marks. I know everyone's excited about this team. It's gonna be fun to watch Julio and AJ team up, but there are some definite concerns. And then Chris has them also going 11-6. He has them as his division winner as well, but it seems like, at least because there's only a game separating them and the Colts in his standings, I'm assuming he's probably in the same boat as us, where there are some question marks still with this team for him. But we saved the best for last, baby. The final team that we're going to go on in this division, the Houston Texans. Last year, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm surprised they won 4 games. I mean, the way we talked about this, I think it's because I think you. I know. Not to bring up a sensitive subject. I know you had them making the playoffs last year. You had them win the division,
Yeah,
and then we we really kind of smashed on you for the whole year. But just the way we talked about them, and maybe because they were so disappointing, I thought they won like 2 games. So when I was doing my research, I was like, they won 4 games last year. That's actually kind of a lot. But yeah, they weren't good. They were just there was so much front office drama. There was all sorts of things. And then the offseason, it continued at first, which feels like eons ago, and it was only a few months ago. Deshaun Watson requested a trade. He was posting pictures of him with San Francisco. He was going to go to Denver. He was going to go all these different places. And then 20, I think it was 28. There's a lot, at
So,
least
too
20,
many to count. Yeah.
quite a few, ridiculous amount. Um, Sexual assault charges were filed against Watson. At the time of this recording, it still has not come out as what's going on with those. It's probably going to be lots of legal and lots of hearings and everything like that over the next probably years potentially. So Deshaun Watson, I mean, we have him there. I mean, that's he looks pretty depressed, and that's how it is, right? I mean, he's it's so I mean it's crazy because he went from on top of the world and then I guess it just shows you that these athletes and really anyone in the public eye, you never really know who the type of person they are behind the scenes. And Watson is, by all accounts, not a great guy. Obviously, when you have 28 sexual assaults charges against you from massage therapists just by just being a creepy guy, which is just not good. So, really, I don't really want to talk about. I don't want to bring the episode down by any means, but I feel like we have to talk about it. So, yeah. So Deshaun Watson, in terms of subtractions, we don't know what's going to happen with him. Is he going to play for the Texans again? There's some rumors going around that there's still teams that want to trade for him. I think namely Denver is the big team that's linked to him, at least right now. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, it's not great there for outside of football. It's not a great situation. But and the weird thing is that was just another thing in just a really bad offseason for the Texans. They also hired I can't even think of the top. What's their new coach's name?
I think David Culley. I think,
David
but
Culley.
I could be wrong.
I was gonna say David Scully, but that's not. Scully's the character from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But yeah, so so they hired probably because no one heard of this guy, and then he got hired probably because nobody wanted this job. There was some Eric Bieniemy rumors when Deshaun Watson was there, and then once the other stuff happened, he's like, "Nah, I'm good." Like I mentioned, this front office drama, it's just a mess. But somehow they still found guys to sign, key additions. So we'll do that as real quick. Shaq Lawson, Marcus Cannon, Christian Kirksey, Malik Collins, the dynamic running back duo Philip Lindsay and Mark Ingram, and of course Tyrod Taylor, because we always have to have the Tyrod Taylor conversation every single offseason because he somehow finds starting jobs. Credit to his agent because his agent's an amazing salesman. Is able to find Tyrod these starting gigs because it's insane that we're having the same conversation for the fourth year in a row. It feels like because there was the Browns, there was the Chargers, and then now there's the Texans.
Buffalo.
So it's
Oh yeah, yeah.
Buffalo, Buffalo. It's insane. I completely forgot about the Josh Allen drama with him in Buffalo. It's Tyrod Taylor. Shout out to your agent. The key subtractions already mentioned: Deshaun Watson, J.J. Watt, Randall Cobb, Darren Fells, and Benardrick McKinney. So really quick, I'm just going to throw in my analysis of this team. They're going to be really bad. They have nothing on either side of the ball. Have to wait and see what happens with Tyrod Taylor. I don't think he's the guy. I'm more interested to see Davis Mills if he gets in there, see what they do. I was actually talking about this with Chris the other night. I would love to see Gardner Minshew. Like, I don't know. I know division trades aren't common, but get Minshew mania into Houston and see what he does. I mean, I think he's a better Davis Mills. We don't know. He was pretty good with Stanford. A lot of people liked him coming out of the draft. He's going to be good, but Minshew I think is definitely better than Taylor. So let's see him get him there and see what happens. But Brandon Cooks, hopefully he gets traded. I think he's a really good receiver. Had a really solid year last year. But it's really him and nothing else on the offense. They got Ingram, they got Lindsey, they
Nico
still got
Collins, baby.
they got David Johnson still too in the running back
Oh
room.
jeez.
He actually had a solid year last year. I feel like people disrespect him a lot, but David Johnson and Brandon Cooks are going to be carrying this offense, which is I don't know how I feel about that. The offensive line is not good. The defense is not good. Obviously, they lost J.J. Watt. They're probably the greatest Texan of all time. So yeah, just not a lot of stuff going on. They did add Shaq Lawson though to kind of replace J.J. Watt, which is not a bad move. But overall, I think this is going to be a really bad team. In my opinion, the worst team in the NFL. We'll see that when I say my record in a second here. But are you all in on the Texans again like you were last year? Do you have you lowered your expectations a little bit?
I look really, really bad after that season, after I hyped them up so much. So I'm going to take the opposite approach. Like you mentioned, they are my worst team in the NFL. I'm very surprised though how many signings they got. But let's be honest, they're all bottom of the bargain bin signings. I mean, nothing really notable. I'm disappointed that Lindsey actually signed with this team. He could have done better somewhere else.
Yeah,
That's my opinion.
I think he's a solid back.
There's no guarantee he'll even start out of the three-headed monster of David Johnson, Lindsey, and Ingram, where he could have started many other places, Miami notably, I'd say.
Right.
But subtraction's obviously huge. Deshaun Watson, who obviously, with the legal stuff happening, like it might not happen right away because he might, in terms of suspension, like you have to wait and see how it plays out. He might actually be active during the season. However, I've heard rumors that he might be like a healthy scratch per se because he's healthy, he's there, he's still participating, but he's working with like the third, fourth string. And they're not going to trade him anytime soon, so he might just be a healthy scratch the entire season, unless he's suspended by the commissioner. But so much to follow, I guess. Watson notably, but I'm just gonna get right to the chase. I have him at 1-16. I think you might agree with me there.
Actually, I got them going 2-15. I
Oh
got them winning
wow!
one more game. I think they might snag one against the Jags. And I think they play. I can't remember the schedule off the top of my head. They play another team that's not good, and I was like, I'll give them another win. It seems like these teams are able to find wins sometimes, but I guess the Jags only won one game last year, so it's definitely possible. But like the Jets, you know how bad the Jets were last year, and I think David Culley. We don't know who he is, but he's definitely a better coach than Adam Gase, right? He has to be. So I think he can find two wins, right? Every team can find two wins. So I got them going 2-15. And Chris also agrees with me as well. He's got them going 2-15 as well. I think we've pretty touched on everything. The in drama, the fight. I mean, we could probably spend, weirdly enough, probably 45 minutes just talking about the Texans and everything that's happened, all the drama that's happened this offseason. But I think we spent enough time on them for this episode. Do you have anything else you want to add for them before we hop into our okay? Seeing you shake your head, which I am completely fine with. So let's do our final standing predictions here for the AFC South. So I'll do mine first real quick. So I have the Titans at 12-5, the Colts at 11-6, then a huge drop off to the Jags at 4-13, and the Texans at 2-15. And then Chris is kind of in the same boat for the most part with me. Same order, just different records. Titans at 11-6, Colts at 10-7, Jags at 5-12, and then the Texans at 2-15. And then I think you have the same order too, but also different records. So what are your final predictions?
Yeah, I have the Titans at 11-6, Colts at 9-8, Jags at 4-13, and the Texans at 1-16. First pick in the 2022 NFL Draft.
Yep. Yep, and that's going to be exciting for Texans fans, right? You got to be excited about that. Last time they had the first, I think they had the first overall pick a lot because they drafted David Carr way back in the day, and then they also got Jadeveon Clowney too, relatively recently. But yeah, I might be mistaken, but I think this might be the first episode that we have where I think we're the same order across the board.
Probably.
The records are different, but we have the same order. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's nice that we're on lock except for once, I guess. But let's do before we get out of here. Let's do the fantasy faves of this division. You and I were talking right before the episode. This is probably the worst division for fantasy. I mean, there's the Titans, and then there's kind of some nice pieces sprinkled across the other three teams, in my opinion, at least. The Colts have some nice guys too, I guess. But so I'll let you start us off there here. Who is your fantasy pick of the division?
Well, this was going to be my honorable mention, but I'll bring them up now just so we can start off on a high note and then work our way down. It's not my guy. I'll talk about James Robinson just for a second. Obviously with ETN being hurt, Robinson's going to go sliding right back to where he was last season. I think he'll have another great season. If he's able to replicate, he'll definitely secure himself another roster spot next season and probably compete even more with ETN in terms of touches. Whereas it was kind of trending ETN's way this year, I think next year can be more of an even split than it ever was before. But I do like Robinson a lot for fantasy this year. Those who got him late in drafts, good for you. You lucky people. So good on that. My other player I wanted to mention, it's gonna sound really bad. We just talked about the team, but I mean, Brandon Cooks could be viable in terms of fantasy this year as a wide receiver. Definitely not going in my starting lineup. Definitely better off as a wide receiver 4 or 5. But if you snag him pretty late in drafts, he'll be one of the only producers on that team. I mean, Tyrod Taylor has to throw the ball to someone. It's going to be Cooks. I liked him last year. He had a good season. He can definitely maybe do it again. However, that's more of a boomer bust pick than anyone I've ever talked about in fantasy before. So hopefully he has a good season. Like you mentioned, he could be traded. Oh, what's up?
Oh, real quick. Did you look at my honorable mention list before we did this episode? Because I had James Robinson and Brandon Cooks as my two honorable mentions, two guys
Oh,
that I really like. So hopefully you didn't snag my main guy. So I'm interested to see what you got here.
no.
But
Well, Cooks was my main guy, but that's all I wanted to say.
oh, excuse me. I thought you said he was your honorable mention. Okay, yeah. So yeah, Brandon Cooks, I really like him. So our redraft league, it's a 2 flex, so you have to have 2 guys in the flex. I actually have, in my 4th flex, Brandon Cooks because I think he's gonna be semi-relevant, I think he's a really solid option. He's going super late in drafts. I got him way late. I think people are kinda forgetting about him and David Johnson, to be honest. So, yeah, I like Brandon Cooks a lot, and James Robinson too. I traded low for him actually, and then I was able to sell him for some nice pieces recently. So shout out to all those guys who either drafted him low or traded or bought low on him, either redraft or dynasty wise. I don't know why I said dynasty. Um, but yeah, so I really like all those picks though, Roman. Sorry to cut you off there. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about Cooks or Robinson?
No, I'm good. I mean, obviously, it depends on who the quarterback is. I think Tyrod Taylor would help Cooks out a little bit. Whether it's Mills, I think they can give him the ball too. So, um, Cooks will obviously be the wide receiver on that team. So he's definitely a late round shot. And he may be able to be productive, maybe more so in PPR format, just because I don't think their scoring upside is that much. I don't think they'll be
Yeah.
scoring a whole lot of games, but they will be passing late in games, that's for sure. So maybe that'll give Cooks an advantage in terms of receptions and yards.
Yeah, I would say too with Cooks, as a Cooks owner, I'm hoping that he gets traded to a different team because I think that could really help him out. That's very possible. We've seen, receivers in midseason like Golden Tate a few years ago. It's not uncommon that a receiver gets traded from a brutal team to a good team midseason. And also with Cooks, um, I think he's a solid kind of like filler starter to start the year, especially if you have some interesting rookie pieces on your bench at receiver like I do. Like I have Devontae Smith and Jamar Chase, so I'm banking on them probably not being super solid to start the year, but then end of the year, take Cooks out, throw one of those guys in, you're good to go. So
Well, don't get us started on Jamar Chase. We'll say that for
yeah,
another
we'll save that for
episode.
the AFC North episode. We already talked about Deshaun Watson. We don't need to talk about the Jamar Chase, but that Jamar Chase is much more rumor, I would say, rather than
Hmm.
fact, like the Watson stuff is. Um, but yeah, so I'll do my fantasy favorite. So mine is I don't have to go over my honorable mentions. You already mentioned Robinson and Cooks. I'll also mention Carson Wentz briefly because I think if he stays healthy, I think he could have a really nice quarterback season. And he's virtually going like super late, undrafted basically. So he's a guy worth taking a flyer on. My fantasy pick though is Julio Jones. I think he's going as like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 right now in drafts. And honestly, like AJ Brown's going as like a bona fide wide receiver 1. This might be a hot take. I know Chris loves AJ Brown, but like I don't think they're going to be that much different in my opinion in terms of like share. I guess AJ's younger, has less injury concerns than Julio, but I think Julio is still going to be really good. And for you to kind of be able to take him as your 2, 3, 4 in some drafts and be able to he has the potential to be a wide receiver 1 leveled guy. I love it. I love Julio and AJ equally, but the draft price of Julio makes him my fantasy favorite in this division because I think he's definitely has some clear upside. And if he gets hurt, he's only your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. So it's not the end of the world if you lose him down to injury. I love it. I hated him last year because he was still being taken as a top guy, like first, second round. I didn't love that draft price, but Julio in the 4th, 5th round, gotta love that. And I think he could really help you out in your teams because I think, like I said, I don't think it's going to be that much different. I think it's very much going to be a 1A, 1B in Tennessee between AJ and Julio.
I can definitely agree with that. I think the 4th, 5th round, that's super late for Julio compared to obviously where he's been going when he was with Atlanta, obviously in the first couple rounds. The hope though for AJ Brown owners, at least I can speak on behalf of those people because I did draft AJ Brown in my redraft. I guess the hope is Julio kind of steps into the wide receiver 1, kind of attracts the better corner,
Yeah.
the corner of the other team, and that's where AJ Brown can excel and maybe be worth the pick in the 2nd round. But he is nursing a knee injury, although he is expected to be back week 1. So if AJ Brown were to miss any time, obviously Julio would be the guy. But like you mentioned, I think they're both going to get their even amount of targets. However, Julio will be attracting the better corners to him, so maybe that leaves some opportunity for AJ Brown. Or even if it's vice versa, it's kind of hard to. It's like pick your poison, really. Like pick your battles between AJ Brown or Julio. The big veteran or the fast young guy. So I think both are going to be very deadly for that team. And I think both are good. I think both are good fantasy options. Although I think I'm still more interested in seeing how Julio adapts to their scheme and what he looks like and how he gets the ball compared to other players. That's still waiting to be seen. But I think taking a shot on him as wide receiver 2, or even a flex guy would be a pretty good option too.
Yeah, I 100% agree there. Yeah, I'm really interested to see what that. I think it's probably the best receiving 1-2 punch in the league, and definitely the most intriguing, probably the most entertaining too. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. And then Chris is sticking with the same team for his fantasy pick. He's got Ryan Tannehill, the guy that's hopefully going to be throwing Julio and AJ all the balls throughout the season. Tannehill, of course, he does have, like you mentioned earlier, he's going to have that. He's got the COVID. He's in the health and safety protocols, all that right now. So hopefully he gets better soon. And is able to be the same. Like I said before, he was an MVP level guy the last 2 seasons. I mean, if he's that guy, and he's definitely got the potential to be that guy because he's got Julio and AJ to throw the ball to. So, and
And he's not.
I'm sorry.
And he's not expensive either. I mean, his
Yeah,
draft
I was about to
ADP
say.
isn't like super high either. So you can definitely wait on him, maybe to like maybe the 6th, 7th, 8th round. I mean, we don't like to take quarterback early, but I think, if you want that positional advantage, go for it. But if you don't get a chance to, definitely snag like a Tannehill or like a Stafford later in the round. So I think, like as I mentioned earlier, I was hyping up Tannehill a lot when we talked about Titans. I think another great season. I think he solidified himself in terms of in real life play and as a fantasy option as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. What I was about to mention too was the draft price. It's virtually nothing. I think, if I might be mistaken, but I think in the redraft league that Chris and I are in, I believe Tannehill went in the last round, and we have it's like a 20-some round draft. I think Tannehill went super late. I know, or maybe no, it was a little bit earlier. It was a little bit earlier, but it was high teens, like mid to high teens. He went super late. So if you're one of those people that likes to wait on quarterback, he should be there in the late rounds, more than likely. So. And the potential there, I think he was a top 10 quarterback last year, maybe even top 5 in terms of fantasy. I think that as long as he can stay healthy, because the COVID is not to be messed with. I mean, if he's got that right now, it's going to be tough to shake that. But if he's able to stay healthy, he can very well be the same level guy and really help you win your leagues. And you could even, honestly, I mean, if you love the Titans, you could probably stack all 3 of those guys. Honestly, you could probably get AJ in the second, Julio in the 3rd or 4th, and then you could also get Tannehill later in the draft. I mean, I don't know if you want to do that. Actually, you could probably do Derrick Henry in the 1st, AJ in the 2nd, Julio in the 4th, and you get Tannehill in like the 10th. I don't know if you
Let's
want to do
pump the
that.
brakes there. I think we'll pump the brakes. I think a
I
little
don't
bit
know
more
if you
than
want to
that.
do that, but it's very possible. Like, this Titans team has a lot of really intriguing fantasy options. So, yeah, if you want to draft AFC South fantasy players, just go to the Titans and then kind of just shut your eyes to the other teams at least. Even though Brandon Cooks and James Robinson I do like as well. But I think that'll do it for this episode. Is there anything else you want to add about the AFC South before we get out of here? Nope. All right. So
Yeah, I think this team or this division as a whole will be, I think, the worst division this year. But I think if you want to talk about Titans and Colts vying for the division winner spot, that's like your main storyline going into this year.
yeah, yep. It's gonna be you got a race to the division, the Titans and the Colts, and the race to the worst team in the NFL between the Texans and Jaguars. You got the two opposite extremes of the spectrum here in this division. But that'll do it for this episode. Once again, we are the Zone Defense Podcast. The NFL season is literally right around the corner. It's insane that we're finally to this point. It feels like just yesterday we were like, oh man, I can't wait for the draft in 2 months, and now we're like a week, 2 weeks away from the opening week. So it's really insane to think. But we do have a couple more divisions episodes we're going to do. Chris is going to have a new fantasy football mini series, doing some more rankings and predictions there. So definitely be on the lookout for those. Hopefully coming within the next week or so. We're also going to do hopefully one more fantasy ranking, fantasy mock draft, possibly, as well as another NFL kind of overall preview episode in preparation for the start of the season. But and we're also going to bring back our weekly pick'em that we did all of last NFL season. So definitely make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and search us on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss any of that awesome content. Be sure to smash that like button down below as well, and drop a comment because it really helps out our channel a lot. Let us know what your thoughts are on the Texans drama and the Titans and the Colts battling for the top of the division, as well as any of the fantasy players that we mentioned today as well. We love reading your comments and trying to respond to them as quickly as we can. But once again, thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.